you can make things grow anywhere as long as you're willing to put in the effort and the time and restore the soil. I think that opened up this world of possibilities.
Hey guys, today we wanted to take the chance to share a bit of our story, our gardening journey, and talk about where we started, what got us into gardening in the first place, where we've kind of come through, where we're at now, and I guess overall how gardening has truly changed our lives. We are different people than we were before we started gardening to now, and it hasn't even been that long. Cassidy and I both come from families that like to garden. When I was, I think, 8, I moved into a house. We inherited a thriving garden. I mean, just beautiful flower garden. There were fruit trees and bushes, blueberries, cherries. There was an apricot, a couple apple trees, and some amazing cherry trees in the yard. That's what I remember as a kid, was just picking the fruits every summer. There was a magnificent flower garden, and it was so prolific that for multiple summers in a row, my mom would just pick flowers and make bouquets and send me down to the end of the driveway, and I would sell them at the end of the driveway. So that was really fun, because I was like, man, I get some money from doing this. I split it with my mom, of course. Other than that, though, growing up, I associated gardening with weeding. I was just doing a chore, the chore of weeding. And a lot of the time I didn't even really make money from it. I remember having a giant lawn, which was really fun to play on, but I also had to mow the lawn. I loved the trees, loved looking at it and seeing it, but I didn't really have much interest in actually getting in there because I associated it so much with clearing out weeds.
I also grew up in a family of gardeners, or my mom took up gardening as a hobby when I was a child, and they bought a house that was about 3/4 of an acre, and it was just all dirt. My parents transformed that yard of dirt into this extremely abundant, beautiful garden. I mean, just load after load of wood chips and manure. And us kids, I have 3 siblings, we'd unload the loads of manure and the loads of wood chips and spread them, and we'd weed, I mean, constantly. And so it's kind of just in my DNA, like we spread cardboard and we spread wood chips, and this was the early 2000s. We had about 40 blueberry bushes, and we would hand cover them with this net contraption that my dad made out of PVC pipes and netting. You'd set up the PVC pipe frame, and then you'd cover it with the netting. I grew up, eating raspberries off of our, raspberry bushes. I never ate raspberries from the store. We never bought blueberries. We'd harvest our blueberries and freeze them, and then we'd have blueberries all winter, like fall, winter, spring. So my parents were like small-scale homesteaders at some level, even though they would not claim that they were at all.
So Cassidy and I met in college, and when we were first married, we just lived in apartments for 3 years. And so we didn't really have much interest in gardening because we couldn't. Cassidy had a few house plants, which was great. I had absolutely no interest in them. We did really get into health and nutrition. We just kind of dove deep into just learning a lot about healthy food and healthy diets and kind of what all that means, and even just like healthy lifestyle things in general. One of the paths that took us down was learning about the importance of healthy soil to grow healthy plants and animals. Also learned about how most of the food that's grown and sold in supermarket, it's bred to be shelf stable for a very long time. So it's bred for storage, not necessarily flavor or nutrition. Late summer of 2019, we moved to a house. We bought a house in a new town, and we started a new job in that area. We didn't even realize it, but we actually had a substantial piece of property. We had, I think the property is 0.4 acres, but we really never went outside. We didn't do anything with the yard. We were very busy with our work until COVID happened. We're obviously isolated. We had already moved to a new place. We were bottled up. We started venturing outside.
On this piece of property, there was a pretty rundown greenhouse, but it was still functioning. Put some shelving in the greenhouse, and I started seeds. And I knew how to start seeds because I started seeds with my mom growing up. And I actually started a lot of things, but then I quickly discovered I couldn't quite plant them anywhere because everywhere was like scraggly, barely alive lawn and like pine needles are everywhere. Taylor dug out one bed, and it took you a while. And you're kind
dug
of
it out
like,
by hand with
I
a
don't
shovel.
want to do that again. Like, that's the only one I'm doing. So he dug that bed out for me. I believe that first season I planted some tomatoes and nasturtium. All the nasturtium got eaten, but we got tomatoes, I think.
That was a lot of the first season. We did the keyhole also.
Taylor got really into permaculture about then, started to research it, get into it, and we had a lot of rocks on our property, and a lot of people have a lot of rocks in that area, and so between us and our friends, Taylor built a keyhole bed, which is a permaculture technique where the bed is not quite fully circular because you want to have like a compost system in the middle.
It's a way to get started. It's very time intensive. I don't know exactly what I was thinking. I think I was just thinking I don't want to spend any money buying soil, but I know raised beds are kind of a thing, and this is sort of like a homemade raised bed. I mean, it looked kind of cool. It was
just like smack dab in the middle of the yard with like no planning of what else would go around it. It was so random.
Yeah, I literally looked at it and I was like, hey,
I think the
sun's gonna hit that.
Yeah, and the rocks were relatively close.
Yeah.
And then we did build a raised bed out of some scrap lumber we had. So I think we grew like zucchinis in there as well. Yeah, that was our first garden.
Yeah. That was year one. Past that, we're the type of people that it's hard for us to dip our toes in something and keep the toes dipped. So we either have to get out all the way, get out of the pool, or dive in. So we chose to dive in. We're doing so much learning about just all the gardening techniques and everything that was possible. And it just slowly dawned on us, I think, how much land we actually had. One thing early on that we kind of caught wind of was the back to Eden method. Huge emphasis on wood chips. You kind of dig through them and then plant beneath them, and they supply your soil with lots of steady nutrients, and you can grow great stuff. In our climate, it's such a dry climate, and the original place that was really practiced was in Sequim, Washington. It's so damp on the west side of the state. If you're not from Washington, it's pretty split into two sides. So we're in eastern Washington. Sequim is on the west side, and the wood chips break down quickly, at least relatively quickly. We didn't exactly know that wouldn't just ensure a great garden. We made it our goal to just cover every square inch of our property in wood chips. So we collected cardboard and wood chips. This was after the first season. I had called some arborists trying to get them to dump wood chips, and one of them said, great, yep, I'll bring it over. And then we had to go out of town for like a weekend. We came back and they had dropped the chips, and they were like covering our entire driveway. You might have been like 8 months pregnant. I mean, I did dumpster diving for cardboard and collected all the scraps that I could find everywhere. And we literally spread all of our front yard in cardboard. So we covered 2,500 square feet of yard in cardboard and wood chips. That's a lot of cardboard, guys. So that was all within the first season, and our hope was to kind of dig it out the next season and get some flowers.
So the original plan was to do like a perennial garden in the front. That next year, I think it was in 2021, Taylor's aunt told me about Florette, and I discovered cut flowers for the first time. We
put in a kind of classic Charles Dowding style no-till bed. We bought in some compost from the local soil supplier, and we got chickens that year.
Yeah, I got chickens.
Yep, I broke my foot, and then we picked up chickens like the next day or something, and I was still working on the chicken coop. Whoops.
He's 3 months old?
Maybe 3 month old, yeah.
3 month old.
Finished the chicken coop. We actually converted the right third of our greenhouse into the chicken coop. 11 hens, 1 rooster, Benji, who is a great rooster. Crazy thing we learned about chickens just by having them was their materials processing ability. I found a local guy who had manure that he was willing to just drop off at my house. He was very close by, and he would just take 10 yards at a time and dump it. And the manure had maggots in it, and I kind of learned about Joel Salatin and how he would graze his cows, rotationally graze them around his property, but he would follow them with chickens because the chickens loved to peck the maggots out of the cow pies. There were maggots in this manure, which was great news for our chickens, because I would just put it into their chicken run. They would scratch through it, they would break it up so that there weren't, those balls of poo. And I also threw tons of leaves in there, and I just noticed, like, man, these guys are just having the time of their lives, scratching and pecking and scratching and pecking and shredding up the leaves and pooping in it. And so then I would take out that material, learned how to take that out and just hot compost it, kind of finish the the compost making process, and I mean, it was just killer compost. So great. That was a very tight system. The beds that we put in the back, the compost that we got was almost certainly dead, microbially. But then we learned about JADAM. Yep. Yeah, I put the JADAM book on my Amazon wish list randomly. I don't know why. And my mom bought it for me for my birthday. I remember opening it as a present, being like, huh, yeah, what is this? Like, and she said, well, it was on your wish list. And I said, oh, yeah, obviously, cool. Yeah, I remember that. No, I didn't, but turned out to be just an insane blessing. Yeah, because, man, I think I read through part of it once, and I was like, okay, maybe another time. And then I read through it a second time, and it kind of started to make a little bit more sense what he was doing. And then it was probably the third pass before I was like, okay. Because it's translated from Korean into English, and it's not the best translation. I mean, it's okay. It's just a little bit clunky. And it's also very practical, agricultural, and scientific advice mixed in with kind of Eastern wisdom that's also mixed with Korean Christianity. It's just a fascinating book. So we got into JADAM, and that really helped to kind of bring some life to our soil quickly.
Yeah, I think that was like the turning point. Our gardening, it shifted from feeling like a coin toss, like, are you gonna get lucky with the yard that you've bought? Can you grow stuff there? There's a thinking, a mentality of like the soil is what the soil is, and if you can't grow anything there, then you can't grow anything there. There's that thinking in, you know, garden spaces. JADAM, especially, and just Korean natural farming, for me, it's shifted in my brain to, you can make things grow anywhere as long as you're willing to put in the effort and the time and restore the soil. And I think that opened up this world of possibilities. I'm already interested in restoration of homes or stuff like that, but then this idea of the restoration of the earth, you know, the soil, the earth, started to, like, you know, become part of who we are and our philosophies and stuff. I think JADAM gives me so much hope that not only could I create beauty in my life and like in our garden, in our lives, but also for like other people, and I can help other people create beauty in their life, you know, and that's just really powerful. In 2022, we basically started to shift our mindset to, our yard is big enough to not only support ourselves in produce and the flowers we want in our home, but it also has the potential to be a micro farm. And that was a big shift in our thinking, and it's influenced our thinking going forward in different spaces. That was a year where we started to play around with this idea of becoming an official micro farm, which never fully realized itself, you know, in that time. But it definitely shifted our thinking about like what our yard was capable of, and also thinking about small spaces really differently. Small spaces are super capable of a lot of production. I mean, growing flowers is extremely satisfying. They're so beautiful. It's satisfying to see the pollinators. It's satisfying to see people drive by your yard really slowly.
We grew so many flowers in the front yard, and then in the backyard we grew all of our veggies. There was so much growing space that I prepared that I mean, at that point we still were like kind of learning how to seed start and plan for all of that. At a certain level, we were like, okay, we don't have any money to buy enough seeds to get plants in every single bed. The best part, I mean, I'd really gotten tomatoes down by that point. We did tomatoes the previous year, and they were so much better. This year, did more tomatoes, and they just got so massive so quickly. I grew over 100 plants, dozens of cabbages, a lot of different herbs, beans, carrots, potatoes, onions, so much garlic. And so after the 2022 growing season, we had our little girl. We're in a position where we had to move for our job. And so we moved towns. We're still in Eastern Washington, but we had to leave our micro farm, which was pretty sad. I mean, we had put like a lot of work into that, and it was pretty hard to leave. There was always this kind of feeling inside where it's like, okay, we've discovered something that we love to do, but then we were moving to another house where the gardening space was so limited. I mean, it was barely anything.
I mean, we went from 2,500 square feet just in the front yard, you know, double that in the backyard, to 100 square feet.
That's where we started our YouTube channel, actually. Was just at this tiny, tiny little strip. It was just kind of bursting out of us. We really wanted to garden so badly. Then this past year, we got the chance to move to this place that we're at now, which is great. And we're in the process of building the soil. We are really loving getting to grow in a bit more space. It still feels like we're not really growing on that much space, but that's just because, you know, we're used to like probably a quarter of an acre of growing space. That being said, we're really happy with where we get to stay now. We're excited to get to build the soil here and grow here for at least the next few seasons. So guys, that's our story. That's kind of what brings us to right here. There's 3 main reasons why we feel like, to sum up all of that, why gardening has changed our lives.
So the first way that we feel like gardening has changed our lives is it's given us a deep sense of purpose. And now this isn't like our full purpose, because this, you know, gardening still lives in the hobby realm for us, and that's great right now, but it does, even in its hobby form, gardening, it just connects you to the earth, it connects you to your surroundings, and it connects you to nature. It gets you outside, which is so good for you. I think that gardening has a lot to offer a person as far as a sense of stability, purpose, meaning, I guess. Especially for us, is like beyond our job. And I think for us, it keeps us from becoming workaholics, and it keeps us from getting so absorbed in our work that we don't have a life, you know, outside of that. I think gardening has really helped with a lot of those things.
The second reason that we believe gardening has changed our lives, is because of the awareness that it's brought us. And, you know, I mentioned that at the beginning, farmers right now, they grow crops that are primarily bred for long-term storage, and they're not necessarily for nutrition, or there's a lot of kind of broken systems. A lot of farmland is corn and soy, and it's just unsustainable practices and all of that. When you actually garden and try and do, you know, some form of agriculture, it kind of humbles you, and you realize, okay, we're very indebted to farmers, because, I mean, even if they're just using terrible practices, it's like, of course we don't want to stay there. We don't want to, we want to move forward with really good life-giving practices for the soil. But growing crops is hard. It is like genuinely a challenge to pull something out of the ground that someone then can eat. And that's what farmers are working every single day to do, so that we can eat. We became so aware of how reliant we have been on farmers our whole lives. And I mean, that may seem obvious. Of course that's the case. But it's not really until you try to grow something yourself, or you raise chickens, or you do whatever, that you realize we have so much to be thankful for in our farmers. They're the reason that we're able to have the lives we have.
The third way we feel like gardening has changed our life is through health. And we weren't necessarily considered unhealthy in the general American sense, but we did not feel good. It felt awful. I mean, I had migraines, probably 2 to 3 migraines a week. Taylor had a lot of gut issues. We felt really lethargic. I mean, we would literally make dinner and sit in front of the TV and watch until it was time to go to bed. I mean, that was our life. We lived in an apartment, so that's part of it too. But yeah, we did not feel good. We did not have energy. I was tired all the time. And it wasn't just gardening that led us to changing our diet, but it's been a huge, you know, partner in that. In just being aware, buying our foods at farmers markets, you know, whenever we can, buying our foods at co-ops, you know, that support local farmers, and then also just learning how to enjoy food again has been a huge part of being healthy. So I think that that's been a huge part of how gardening's helped with that.
And also, gardening is just like legitimately amazing exercise. And you kind of, you know, you have, just like with any exercise, you have to be careful to not overdo it on like one side. Like if you're shoveling compost or dirt or whatever, you want to switch sides. But for the most part, so many of these movements, I mean, squatting to plant and reaching, you know, to pick, they're just really natural movements. That wraps up actually the kind of the core, how we think gardening has changed our lives. We're choosing to be fully content with what we've got right here. And we're going to do our best to bring life to every corner of the property that we can. At the same time, we definitely, as far as where we're headed, we would love to actually branch out much more than that in the future. We really would love to have some more growing space. It doesn't have to be tons of acres. We want to be able to grow on a much larger scale eventually. We want to really just continue to learn how to grow plants really well. Flowers and vegetables and perennials and all sorts of things. Fruit. But we also want to raise livestock. and we want to get back into chickens, we get into goats, you know, maybe have some pigs. It'd be awesome to get a dairy cow one day, maybe raise some meat cattle. Anyway, we have large aspirations, and at the same time, we want to really be content and actually just learn from this property, take what this property can actually teach us. It has a lot, for sure.
Thanks so much for watching and hearing our story. We'd love to hear your story in the comments about how gardening has changed your life. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe to our channel.